Bruce Cathie, who passed away in 2013, was someone who had a fascinating life. There is no doubt about that. That said, let's delve into his strange, but intriguing, world of UFOs, levitation and anti-gravity, even the Men in Black. For many years he was a captain with the National Airways Corporation of New Zealand. He mainly flew Fokker Friendship and Boeing 737 aircraft. In 1952, after an encounter with a UFO in Mangere, Auckland, Cathie decided to solve the mystery by himself. It was impressive. There was some chance, but Cathie did at least what he could. What Cathie discovered, however, was what he called a worldwide magnetic grid system, an invisible grid that had its origins in antiquity and allowed those piloting the UFOs to soar across the Earth, almost as a train would on the New York subway or London Underground. The images are decidedly impressive. But what about the reality of Cathie's theories? Well, it wasn't long before Cathie began to focus all of her UFO research on the network angle. Journalist and writer Mark Pilkington said of Cathie and her work, gathering all the information she could on the subject, Cathie discovered the work of French ufologist A.M. Michel, who, in the early 1950s, proposed that UFOs traveled the world following straight lines between specific landmarks. As a pilot, the theory made sense to Cathie, who began plotting UFO flight paths around New Zealand. Before long, she had plotted a complex system of radial grids over the entire country. But UFOs were being seen all over the world. As time went on, Cathie further expanded her work and her theories. And, the more she believed in the grid angle, the more she developed a growing body of followers. She also developed a body of skeptics. Cathie hardly cared. She went on and on without stopping. After years of work, I discovered that I could formulate a series of unified harmonic equations. As time went on, Cathie further expanded her work and her theories. And the more she believed in the lattice theory, the more her following grew. She also developed a body of skeptics. Cathie hardly cared. She pressed on and on and on. After years of work, I discovered that I could formulate a series of unified harmonic equations that indicated that all physical reality was in fact manifested by a complex pattern of interlocking waveforms. Gradually I discovered that harmonic values could be applied to all branches of scientific research and to atomic theory. There was also something even more incredible, something that is even more relevant to the history of antigravity in earlier times. Cathie soon came to the conclusion that this grid system was equivalent to the technology that allowed the ancients to lift huge stones and place them virtually anywhere on the planet. Cathie said, "Numerous unexplained stone ruins have been found as remnants of past cultures, including those of the Mayans, the Incas, the Aztecs, and the Egyptians. In many cases, the ruins indicate patterns that were originally geometric in design. Reconstruction and measurement have shown beyond doubt that, in many cases, the buildings and structures had inherent mathematical concepts that were directly related to light, gravity, and mass." One of the most fascinating aspects of Cathie's lifelong work in this field led him to cross paths with the U.S. government. However, unlike 1950s ufologist Morris K. Jessup, Cathie was not concerned with chatting with the government. Specifically, it was the Defense Intelligence Agency. In the words of its own staff, the DIA states, "The Defense Intelligence Agency provides military intelligence to warfighters, defense policymakers, and force planners in the Department of Defense and the intelligence community in support of U.S. military planning and operations, and weapons systems acquisition." The DIA staff consists of experts in military history and doctrine, economics, physics, chemistry, world history, political science, biosciences, and computer science, among other disciplines. DIA officers travel around the world and meet and work closely with professionals from foreign countries. An impressive organization indeed. Let's go back to 1965. Timothy Good, ufologist and author of the best-selling UFO book Above Top Secret, published in 1987, states that Cathie first approached the U.S. Embassy in Washington in the mid-1960s, and from then on the DIA kept a file on him. The first documented memo is from Colonel John Burnett, Air Attaché, to the Foreign Technology Division at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, dated August 26, 1965. Colonel Burnett recorded the following words in his report: "Captain Cathie visited me for about half an hour. I observed that this New Zealander was not only rational but intelligent, and was convinced that certain UFOs he and others had seen were from outer space, probably Venus. He was hesitant to express his beliefs about the Venus origin, explaining that he usually tended to convince people that he was a bit of a crackpot. Most ufologists can relate to that issue of having their personality tainted." Timothy Good also had something to say. By 1967, Colonel Burnett had been replaced by Colonel Lewis Walker, who seems to have been less impressed with Cathie's ideas than his predecessor. But this did not stop Walker from forwarding Cathie's material to DIA at the Pentagon. Now, what Colonel Walker had to say about all this? The military continued. Captain Cathie is still employed as a pilot of the F-27 Friendship aircraft by the National Airways Corporation. His superiors are aware of his interest and activity in UFOs and his forthcoming book, Harmonic 33. He has undergone checks for safety reasons and no adverse reports are known. He admits that many people consider him to be something of a crackpot, but he persists in his theory. In January 1968, he came to my office and reported that 4 UFOs had been detected by the Auckland Air Traffic Control Radarscope in January 1968, at 2,335 hours local time. The DIA continued. 3 objects were 15 miles apart in line, with the 4th object in line 30 miles behind the 3. The relative speed was extremely high. In addition, 2 UFOs, disc-shaped, appeared east of Auckland Airport on the same trajectory as the first 4. Captain Cathie was asked if any official reports had been filed on these sightings, and he replied that no, civil aviation personnel had been warned not to report these sightings any further. Captain Cathie is a thin, wiry New Zealander with apparent superior knowledge of mathematics. He is intensely sincere in his efforts. He spends an enormous amount of time and effort trying to prove his theory that there is a global master plan by an alien race, purpose undefined. Now, the story becomes somewhat sinister. Defense Intelligence Agency documents show that Cathie had made no less than a stern complaint to the Americans that a. he was being watched by U.S. agents, and watched closely, and that b. he wanted those same agents removed, and quickly, too. Cathie said, but did not explain how she knew, that there were men in black-type characters on the USS Eltonin. As for the ship itself, it turns out that it was in New Zealand harbor when Cathie went on her rant against the U.S. government. As for the USS Eltonin, here is a brief description of it. USNS Eltonin was launched in 1957 as a Navy cargo ship with a special feature that would prove essential to scientists. She was built with an ice-worthy double hull and officially classified as an ice-breaking cargo ship. In August 1962, she was refitted to conduct research in the Southern Ocean and reclassified as an oceanographic research vessel, TAGOR-8. In fact, the Eltonin was one of the world's first Antarctic research vessels. The DIA outlined the history of this curious oversight. Captain Cathie said that the New Zealand government had authorized him to continue his research and that he had a letter to that effect signed by the Prime Minister. He stated that the Member of Parliament for his area, Dr. Findlay, had interceded on his behalf and obtained government approval for his work. He then asked DATT, Defense Attaché, to withdraw their agents. "I have official authorization to continue my work. I don't want to be followed." DATT did not respond to this request. This man is obsessed with his theory, and no argument can convince him that he has not stumbled upon a very complicated system which, according to him, leads directly to the existence of UFOs. Perhaps Cathie really discovered that complicated system. Or, after all, there may have been a certain degree of paranoia, of the kind that also infected UFO researcher Morris Jessup. Was Bruce Cathie really being secretly surveilled as a result of his research on such topics as antigravity, levitation, and the pyramids of Egypt? Or, in a decidedly ironic state, had he become a victim of his own brand of paranoia? If so, was it paranoia that made him believe he was under surveillance, when the reality of the situation might have been very different? Who were the 3 people who accosted Cathie at the Grand Hotel in 1968? If she was being watched, what was the objective? And what was it that led Cathie to be monitored for security reasons? Given the detailed words Cathie had to say about all this, it is possible that there were, and perhaps still are, additional files on this curious aspect of Cathie's life. Furthermore, we must remember that it was Cathie herself who contacted the US military, not the other way around. By this I mean that the Defense Intelligence Agency was not begging to know the results of Cathie's work and research in antigravity. The DIA personnel assigned to deal with Cathie spent enough time to make it clear that they found her theories interesting to say the least. However, DIA was not interested enough to justify funding, which might well have been what Cathie had hoped for. But, shouting out loud that he had been approached by US agents would hardly have gotten Cathie in the DIA's good books.so. Certainly, yes, the DIA did follow Cathie's work, and over a period of several years. But there is no hard data that anything sensational came to light. Unless, of course, those men in black knew a lot more. And, based on what we've seen, that could have been the case. In this curious caper, the questions are many. Of course, none of this proved to the DIA, or, for that matter, to any US government agency, that the pyramids of Egypt were fantastically high-tech construction. So far, this proves two things and two things only. A. Bruce Cathie contacted the authorities regarding his investigation, and B. As a result, those same authorities were at least mildly interested in what he had to say. Whether there was more going on behind the scenes remains to be seen. In the end, though, the DIA's approach to Cathie was not particularly exciting. Things were very different, however, when it came to the US Navy and Morris Jessup. There was clear concern on the Navy's part as to what Jessup, and possibly Carlos Allende, had encountered or stumbled upon. There is no doubt that, whatever one thinks of his ideas, Bruce Cathie lived a fascinating life, a life that took him into both ancient times and recent times.
I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe to support this kind of content. See you on the next travel.